You'd think after 45 years of slaughtering campers and surviving countless sequels, reboots, and lawsuits, Jason Voorhees would finally get a proper comeback. But no. What we get instead is a rebranded corporate Frankenstein called the Jason Un1v3se, or just Universe. And yeah, it looks about as soulless as it sounds. Today, we're going to be taking a quick look at the messy rights battle that's still haunting the Friday the 13th franchise, the bland new redesign, and why the latest multi-platform expansion feels less like a love letter to horror fans and more like a cynical cash grab dressed in a hockey mask. So let's get into it. All right, folks, let's be honest. Jason Voorhees looked like he just walked out of an AI-generated slasher reboot sponsored by Mountain Dew. Horror Inc. revealed the new design as part of their Jason universe, with the number in it and the 3 and the whatever, because we're apparently living in a sci-fi channel timeline where NFTs rule the roost. And it's not hard to feel like this whole thing is less about honoring a horror icon and more about squeezing every last penny out of the corpse of the franchise. He still has the machete, sure, he's still big, masked, and brooding, but the whole thing feels more like cosplay than killer, more Fortnite than fear, and he's also, by the way, been added into Fortnite. More merch drop than menace, and that's the problem. The redesign is just the mask. What's underneath is a bloated, over-branded idea cooked up by people who seem to think that multi-platform horror universe is a phrase fans have been begging for. Pro tip. They haven't been. Horror fans don't want to activate Jason across gaming, collectibles, immersive experiences, and what's very likely going to be an NFT shaped like a hockey mask. What we want a movie. We want a real one on the big screen where Jason actually does something other than hover over a Twitter account waiting to be monetized. But of course, nothing about Jason has been simple for a long time. The rights are, quite frankly, an absolute nightmare. It's an ironic twist for a slasher icon. Victor Miller, the original screenwriter, reclaimed the U.S. rights to the 1980s screenplay, which means he technically owns Pamela Voorhees and young Jason. Meanwhile, Horror Inc. has the rights to adult Jason and the sequels, but not in the U.S., and New Line owns the actual trademarks. So if you're keeping score at home, one guy owns the story, another guy owns the mask, and a third guy owns the logo. This isn't a franchise. It's a freaking hostage negotiation. And that's why the universe feels like such a scam. They can't make a proper film without a legal summit and 3 sets of lawyers. So instead, they've decided to pivot to activations. Horror Inc. has partnered with Stryker Entertainment, best known for putting logos on lunchboxes, and they're promising games, events, merch, and immersive horror experiences, which sounds suspiciously like we couldn't make a movie, so here's a haunted maze in a mall parking lot. The way that they talk about it feels like it came from a keynote at a horror marketing seminar: global awareness and multi-generational appeal and cross-platform storytelling. Jason's not a character anymore. He's a brand asset, a vertical, a slasher-shaped IP ripe for synergy. You can almost hear the brainstorming sessions where someone pitched a Jason coin or a killer-themed loot crate. And hey, maybe that's where this ends up. Not with a Scream, but with a blockchain. This is what happens when the rights to a beloved franchise get sliced and diced worse than a camp counselor in Part 7. Nobody's protecting the story. Nobody's worried about tone or legacy. They're worried about TikTok views and licensing deals. They're building a quote-unquote universe without a single compelling reason for it to exist outside of the fact that Jason still trends, still sells, still clicks. And sure, I get it. Jason is timeless, but that doesn't mean you can just shove him into whatever monetizable gimmick is trending and expect it to somehow work. The sad part is how hollow it all feels. This isn't about making something scary. It's about making something scalable. It's the fans who've kept this damn franchise alive through decades of dormancy, lawsuits, and studio indifference, and they're now being treated like piggy banks with emotional attachments. Horror Inc. talks about honoring the legacy. But if they really understood the legacy, they'd know that it doesn't start with a press release. It starts with a camera in the woods, a slow build of tension, and a shadow moving just out of frame. Instead, we're getting Instagram filters and press events. And yeah, they'll probably launch a game at some point in time, only for the license to expire down the road and fans to get burned once again. Or maybe they're going to put together a Camp Crystal Lake themed escape room, which actually, that does sound kind of cool, I'm not going to lie. But we've seen all of this before. Franchises stretched so thin, they become literally unrecognizable. Look at what happened to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Okay, do you not remember the story to this one? Do you remember the bad masks and the marketing stunt that didn't land? That's what happens when you start with the merch and try to figure the story out later. Jason Voorhees doesn't need a next chapter. He doesn't need to be reinvented for modern audiences or introduced in a new generation through gamified content and synergy strategies. He just needs to be Jason. Put him at Camp Crystal Lake, give him a sharp object, and watch him stabby, slashy, dicey. You turn the lights down, you let people get freaked out. That's it. That's the formula. No NFT required. No activation required. No synergy required. Just stabbergy. Okay, I'm coining that term, stabbergy. That's what they got to do. What's frustrating about all of this is that it could have been something. It could have been actually like a triumphant return, a full-scale moment after the rights finally got sorted out. But instead of blood in the water, we get buzzwords in the press. Jason's not stalking teenagers. He's chasing quarterly revenue targets. And when the most terrifying thing about your slasher villain is how many trademarks and partnerships are required to legally use him, you've already lost the plot. Jason Voorhees is a horror icon. He doesn't need to evolve into a tech-forward, brand-integrated mascot for a line of overpriced collectibles sold to Gen Xers in their 50s. He just needs to be scary again. But with the way this universe is shaping up, the only thing getting butchered is the soul of the franchise. Anyway, I want to know your thoughts about this. Let me know in the comments section. My name is Matt. I'll see you guys later.